The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, my words will abide in you. Ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Our theme this evening, dear brothers and sisters, is the joy of the gospel with Mary. That's what we want to reflect upon, and that's what we want to take home as a message, so that we will have a joy-filled Singapore and a church that is filled with joy. So we got to understand what is this joy all about, so that we'll be able to embrace it and to live it out in our lives. But today, as we congregate and to focus on this theme of the joy of the gospel with Mary, we are invited to reflect and to pray and to understand this word joy, so that it may be part of our lives, so that we will cultivate this sense of joy wherever we are, whatever we do, whatever our state of mind is. So the way we got to understand this word, it is not an emotional word. I feel good right now. I am happy. Tomorrow I feel sad. I'm down. This joy is a virtue. Like any other virtuous word, we need to cultivate, pray, ask God for the grace, and to live it out in our lives. There is a big word that I'm going to use. It's not my word, but scripture scholars use this to help us understand this concept. The word is eschatology, and they use it in two different ways. The way they use it is eschatology at the end time. And very often in our funeral liturgy, we understand this, that our God is merciful, our God is forgiving, and our God will receive this brother or sister of ours into paradise. And we are happy that God is so gracious to welcome our brother, our sister, in spite of shortcomings, failures, weaknesses, to allow that person to reside in the Father's house. The joy. Another way of using this word, as scripture scholars invite us, is realized eschatology. That simply means now. We do not wait for joy at the end time. Today, right now, we got to be men and women who embrace this joy. And this is very well articulated in the hymn of Magnificat that Mary sings. My soul glorifies, for God has chosen to do these, to lift up the downtrodden. We look around, are there downtrodden in our world today? So many of them. And yet she sings this song out of hope and joy that God is going to lift up. And He is going to do this, to feed the hungry. Many people who work in the ministry of Vincent de Paul will tell us there are lots of hungry people in Singapore and that they are feeding regularly. And the Magnificat sings with hope and with joy that the hungry will be fed. And so we embrace this hymn, this joyful hymn that is inviting us to be collaborators in this call. That you and I, as members of this church, members of the Christian community, are called to be men and women who are filled with hope and joy, because God is going to do something extraordinary through us. And that is why Christian and our faith has to be rethought. That as a church, we are not called just to polish ciboriums and chalices. As a church, you and I have a mission. And the mission sometimes calls us to dirty ourselves. That we work among people to bring joy to people who have lost hope. That we move out with a sense of mission, recognizing our church as weaknesses and failures, a joy that God is setting us free and liberating us from our weaknesses and our failures. The gospel of joy invites us that we've got to be collaborators, politically, socially, and culturally, to build a nation, not just for the advancement of nation, but for the advancement of humanity. That our actions, that what we do in Singapore as nation building should also be for the advancement of fellow Singaporeans. That is the gospel joy that we are called to bring. In order to do this very effectively, dear brothers and sisters, there are again two scriptural words that we have to keep in mind. And one of the words that we are familiar with is the call narrative. Every time we read the scriptures, we recall and we read and we remember that Mary was called, Peter was called, the disciples were called, Zacchaeus was called, and many others were called. But what we sometimes forget is these same men and women who were called were also sent. That God who chose these people also sent them, sometimes 2 by 2, sometimes as 72, sometimes in multitude, that they were sent with the same mission to bring this joyful gospel in a world that is divided and broken, to bring joy into families that are going through difficulties and hardship, to bring joy into our worship, that every time we sing and we pray, we are both liberated and empowered. To recognize that we are sent with a joyful message, that we have embraced it and we are committed to it, and now we are called and sent to share this message with many others. While thousands of years have come to celebrate this joy, there are many thousands who are looking for joy elsewhere in Singapore right now, because they are lonely, they are in pain, they are in isolation, they are lost. Can you and I be men and women who can be sent to bring this joy? Mary did in her own way many years ago. Mary continues to do that to the many Novenites who come here out of great devotion to her. We are also invited to make this gospel a joy-filled one, so that the joy of freedom, the joy of peace, the joy of multi-racial and religious people living in harmony can be experienced by all of us who have made Singapore our home. We ask our Blessed Mother's intercession, and we ask God to give us the grace. As a Catholic Church, you and I will not be spectators, but will be evangelizers. We will take the gospel seriously, and we will evangelize in our own way, in the given area, to the best of our ability, in our homes and schools and working place and in our church. We are doing that pretty well. You walk into any parish, there are hundreds of lay ministers who are collaborating with their parish priests to bring this gospel life. But God is asking all of us. We pray for that this evening, for that blessing and the grace we need.